Gnostic psychology, the science of the soul, of the conscious self-psychology, originally the study of the psyche, or soul, psyche, was never intended to be confined to neurons, cognition, or behavior. In its earliest and truest form, psychology was a sacred science, the study of the full human being, including body, mind, breath, and the animating spirit. It was inseparable from theology, and it was inseparable from gnosis, direct, conscious, experiential knowledge of oneself and of the cosmos. The term psychologia was first used in Latin by Marko Marulić in the late 15th or early 16th century, and was later defined in English by Steven Blankaart in 1694. Anatomy, which treats the body, and psychology, which treats of the soul. At that time, no boundary existed between faith and reason, ritual and analysis, spirituality and science. The distinction between theology and psychology is a modern invention and a dismembering of ancient wholeness. Gnostic psychology seeks to restore this unity. It is not merely the examination of thought patterns or behaviors, but the conscious recollection of our nature, origin, and destiny. It answers the fundamental questions. Who are we? What have we become? Where were we placed, and where are we headed? From what are we being healed, and how? The gospel of truth speaks of this return to self-awareness. He who is to have knowledge in this manner knows where he comes from and where he is going. He knows as one who, having become drunk, has turned away from his drunkenness, and having returned to himself, has set right what are his own. Drunkenness represents forgetfulness, the loss of conscious connection to our origin in the deity. To become sober is to awaken from this forgetfulness and reorient the self toward the truth. The deity who formed humanity is both the point of departure and the final destination. In this, the maxim, know thyself, becomes a spiritual imperative. As Hippolytus wrote, discover God within thyself, for he has formed thee after his own image. The extracts from the works of Theodotus makes clear that liberation is not achieved through ritual alone, but through knowledge. It is not only the washing that is liberating, but the knowledge of who we were and what we have become, where we were or where we were placed, whither we hasten, from what we are redeemed, what birth is, and what rebirth. This knowledge begins not with physical origins, but with moral and spiritual orientation. The fall was not the introduction of physical death, for cellular decay, aging, and the return to dust have always been part of the natural order. The fall, rather, was moral, a turning away from the higher power and the law of the spirit toward a life governed by desires of the flesh. Thus, the problem is not mortality, but alienation from the deity. In the teachings of Silvanus, we find an appeal to examine the full human constitution. Know yourself, that is, from what substance you are, or from what race, or from what species. Understand that you have come into being from three races, from the earth, from the formed, and from the created. This tripartite model, earthly, formed, and created, corresponds to body, soul, and mind. It echoes the writings of Philo of Alexandria, who also described the human person in terms of body, soul, external senses, and reason. These are not separate compartments, but integrated aspects of one whole person. To know thyself, then, is to understand one's total structure and its orientation, either toward corruption or renewal. Philo also emphasized that this introspection must lead to the recognition of the invisible mover. Know thyself and thy own parts, and who it is who moves those marvelous things, whether it is the mind that is in thee or the mind of the universe. The deity is not disembodied nor abstract, but the origin of all structure, order, and life. What is within a person, reason, breath, and movement, is a reflection of that divine order. John Calvin rightly observed that true self-knowledge must begin with two things: knowledge of what we were given at creation, and recognition of our present moral condition. The first concerns the structure and purpose of the human being. The second, our deviation from it. This condition, called sin in Scripture, is not a change in physical nature, but a corruption of will, a misalignment of desires, and a disruption of the conscious relationship with the deity. Without this knowledge, life becomes aimless. People follow the impulses of the body, the instincts of the moment, with no awareness of their trajectory. As Scripture says, "What is your life? It is even a vapor." James 4:14. Moses understood this and prayed, "So teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Psalm 90:12. The brevity of life demands not despair, but wisdom. It is also vital to clarify that Scripture does not teach the immortality of the soul. The soul, understood as the breath of life or conscious self, is not inherently eternal. It can perish. Matthew 10:28. It can be redeemed or lost. Immortality is not natural to humans. It is something to be put on at the resurrection. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 54. Ancient philosophy was not unanimous on this point. Both Stoicism and Epicureanism rejected the immortality of the soul, affirming instead a finite bodily existence. Gnostic psychology thus affirms a path of restoration, not to a formless, bodiless state, but to a renewed and incorruptible form of life. It is not a denial of our corporeality, but a transformation of it. To understand oneself is to recover memory of one's creation, to recognize one's present moral estrangement, and to begin the journey toward reconciliation and wholeness. This science of the conscious self is not complete until it leads to the deity, not as an abstract idea, but as the very source of life, intelligence, and form. To know oneself fully is to know the one who formed us.